Grades of Green students. My name is Emily G, and I'm our Director of Global Schools here at Grades of Green.
And I'm Emily Stewart, and I'm a Program Coordinator, and I'm also running the Water Challenge.
Awesome. So we're really excited to talk to you guys today about how to create a movement. At this point in the school year, so many students that we've been talking to have great activities and actions picked out and are starting to form those teams to really create this ripple effect at change. So we're excited to talk to everyone about how to bring it to that next level and how do we make what we're doing at a school level or at a Grades of Green team level create that ripple effect that can go across a school, across a city, or maybe even across a state or country as well. So today, for the agenda, we'll be talking a little bit about where we are now, what a movement really is, and how you can start to create a movement. And then we're really excited to welcome Rob Arno, who's with Incitement, who will give us his inside opinion and experience about how he was involved in a campaign as well. So we'll be starting with some general ideas about a movement, and then we'll hear about Rob's experience and his tips for creating a movement as well. Here at Grades of Green, our vision is to make environmental protection second nature in young minds, and we're excited to work with students across the globe as you take actions and protect the environment. So today, what we're going to be talking about is really how do we create that ripple effect, and where are our schools and students now, and how can we take it to that next level. So Grades of Green students are located all across the globe and working on a whole bunch of different types of environmental actions. In fact, on the Grades of Green website, you can go to the Take Action button to choose over 40 different activities. But really, any of those activities that you're working on have the ability and the capacity to create a movement in your team, your school, and beyond that as well. So when you've got your team ready and you've got your Grades of Green team in place, it's then time to pick team captain roles and start rolling to make that movement even bigger. So by this time in the year, around January, we're hoping that you've created that Grades of Green team, you've selected an action or an activity from the Take Action tab of the Grades of Green website, you've met with your advisor, and you've set a goal for your activity. If any of these steps are still steps you're working on, that is totally fine. Feel free to email info@gradesofgreen.org, and we'll pair you with an advisor or introduce you to your advisor if you're unsure of who that is. And at any time too, you can also review and check out our last webinar. We'll put a link in the comment section to our Creating a Team webinar. So if you're starting or want a little bit of a refresher, we'll add the link to the Grades of Green team training activity and webinar in the comment section after this. And after this, you can also email info@gradesofgreen.org if you want to get with your advisor to help you set that goal. So once your first portion of your activities are complete, it's then time to create a movement. So how can we expand that idea and that action from your school to your city to your community and potentially even beyond that as well? That idea of expanding an idea or a movement is when a group of people work together to advance their shared political, social, or artistic ideas. So whether you're working on the Water Challenge, maybe with Emily or Jordan, maybe you're working on the Trash-Free Lunch Challenge with Robin, Kathy, Anjali, or Karen, or you're a Grades of Green student that's across the globe and you're working on an activity like banning styrofoam or creating a litter monster outfit. Whatever you're working on right now, hopefully these tips and best practices can spark some ideas of how to take it to the next level and how to really set a goal that's achievable and can inspire other people to join that movement too. So at Grades of Green, what we've noticed is that no matter what activity you're taking on, movements start with our students. We're really excited because students, you guys are the ones that really become empowered to lead a Grades of Green activity, and then those shared ideas and your new skill set then can translate into bringing it to your families, your communities, and creating a ripple effect of change. So if you're taking on your Trash-Free Lunches activity, bringing that home to your parents and community can help spark change, or maybe you're taking on a no idle zone activity to turn your car off in front of a school zone. Those ideas can really expand to help take your idea and the impact that you're making and have it make an even broader change. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how we really create that movement, and I'm going to turn it over to Emily, and she's going to share some ideas of what the characteristics are to create a campaign or a movement that has the ability to expand in your impact and your reach.
So as Emily G was saying, movements can look really different in different places, and they can have different goals, but there are some common things that successful movements that really create a big impact have in common. So one of those characteristics is that really effective movements are goal-oriented. So they have a common goal that everyone gets behind that actually has a measurable impact. So for example, some of our water challenge schools have set the goal of conserving a certain number of gallons of water. So say that's 100,000 gallons of water in their school community. And they also have a goal of involving a certain percentage of their school community. So say that's 75%. So at the outset, they know that they want to conserve 100,000 gallons of water, and they want to involve 75% of their students in this challenge. So right from the outset, you can create action items out of those goals. So in order to involve that number of people, we need to spread the word and have sign-up sheets and create team roles and positions for those people who want to get involved. In order to conserve that amount of water, we actually have to have a water challenge form with action items for ways that people can take home that challenge and do it at home and measure the amount of water that they've conserved. Then we have to have a timeline for how we're going to distribute all of that information, collect it back, and create our metrics and see how we've achieved our goal. So really effective movements are goal-oriented, and they have a number or a goal or an idea that can be celebrated and measured. Effective movements are also visible. So it isn't a movement if nobody knows about it. And we've seen our Grades of Green students come up with really creative ways for how to make their movement visible on a school campus, also in a community or at a citywide level. And so now with social media, that's a really great way to spread the word beyond your school community. But even on your campus, creating fun posters, announcements, bulletin boards, giant bulletin board displays, using recycled art or recycled materials to create artistic displays, or even coming up with fun and creative ideas such as like flash mobs or going on a local radio channel and advertising. These are some of our ideas that our students have come up with that have been really effective and creative. Your movement also has to be desirable. So in order to create a movement of lots of people who get behind your idea, they have to want to join. So they have to know why it's important, what they can do to take action, and it should be fun. So in order to create a cohesive team that can roll out your movement, it's really important to celebrate your team leaders and come up with fun ways to get them involved and also to celebrate their achievements. And then also your movement has to be doable. So a movement can't be created alone. So when I was at the Youth Corps meetup in LA last week, or 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of talking to Kathy, who's a longtime Grades of Green program advisor, and she was advising a Youth Corps student who was saying, well, I had this goal of creating this really amazing mural in my community, showing why plastic pollution is harmful to the environment and what actions can be taken to reduce plastic pollution. And so Kathy asked her, so what's your first step? And she said, well, I'm going to go out into my community and look around and make a list of all of the places that I could make my mural. And Kathy said, actually, what's another way that you could actually turn that single action into a community or a movement action? And she said, well, actually, I could recruit my friends and tell them what my goal is. So my goal is to find a mural space, why it's important. It's important because plastic pollution is really harmful to our ecosystems. It's a huge problem, and there are everyday actions we can take to actually raise awareness and to reduce the amount of plastic we create. And I could also tell them what exactly I'm looking for. So I'm looking for a wall that's this big, made out of this material, in this kind of location. So as soon as she empowered the people on her team with that information, they were actually able to become leaders as well. They were involved in the movement, they cared about it, they knew what the goal was, and they were part of it immediately. So in order to create a movement, you have to actually create other leaders as well.
I love that. So here are some examples of Grades of Green students who have been creating movements that we're really proud of. Emily said a few examples of our Youth Corps eco leaders in Los Angeles who have been creating movements and that we're really excited about, and really all of our students around the globe have been working on this idea of how to take something that's starting in a school or a city and make the biggest impact possible with that idea. So to highlight some, we wanted to just give a quick shout out to some people who have been working on different ideas of movements and campaigns at the city or school level. The first one is schools that are involved in our Trash Free Lunch Challenge. We were really excited that if that means, for example, that you are looking to ban styrofoam, one way to call attention to that and create visibility is to create some sort of campaign or activation that others around the community can get get a part of and really see the difference. So for example, this is Helmer's in Long Beach, and they ended up stacking all of their trays from one day or 1 week to create almost a tower so that you could see the visual representation of what that means. And it was a great way for others in the community to get involved and to see what that really looks like and why it's important to change our actions and our habits. Also, we're really proud of Riley. Riley is a youth corps student in Los Angeles who puts together an Earth Fair every year, and we're amazed. This is actually Riley's 5th year creating that Earth Fair. So the consistency creates that campaign that others can rely on and get really excited about as well. And then another example is Antonio, who started doing our No Idle Zones activity at his school, which was to turn off the car engine while waiting outside of a school zone so it decreases emissions around a school campus. He then was able to create a partnership with others, bring it to the city level, and then actually brought it to the state level as well. So by creating a partnership, aligning with others, he brought it to the city, and ACR 160 was officially passed, I believe, a year and a half ago now, thanks to Antonio. So by creating a movement, creating a campaign, and creating a specific goal, it was then able to get to a point where others could add on to it, become a part of it, and it's just a great way to show that community building aspect and how others can work together when there's a goal that's outlined and created. So great job to these students who created movements, and really all of our students around the world. We wish we had more time to showcase all of the movements. If you have other ideas of how you've been creating a movement in your area or your city, feel free to comment in the comment section, and we're really excited to see it. Also, if you have other ways that you've been creating movements, tag @GradesOfGreen on your Instagram posts, and we'll make sure to repost those as well. It's your stories that are inspiring others, so feel free to let us know what those are, and we're excited to spread the word. Before we move on and bring Rob up to share his story about a campaign that he worked on, we wanted to leave with 5 tips for how to create your movement or your campaign. The first one is to add the why to the how. So for example, if your habit that you're looking to change is to decrease trash on campus, make sure to add in why that's important and why that is making a bigger impact in your community. By adding the habit change of decreasing waste to why trash and waste reduction is important, you're going to have a longer term outcome because others can feel invested in that issue with you and see the backstory of why that's really important. The second one is announce your goal and spread the word so that others can participate. So this is a great one, for example, of Emily's example of creating a goal that's 75% of students on campus can participate in that. Or maybe it's a goal of creating something at the city or the state level that you're looking to get passed. So create that goal and let others participate in that goal with you so that you're creating other leaders in your community and you're creating other advocates as well. The third one is visualize your goal and your progress to others. So maybe if it is a goal of having 75% of your community members participate, you could make a thermometer and bubble in the amount of people who are participating or who are taking a pledge with you. By having some sort of visual identity of something, it allows others to want to participate and also just helps others engage and dialogue about that goal as well. The fourth is partner up. So this one is really, really important because there are so many great local organizations and maybe even other people in your area that want to work on something with you. If we're able to research those partners, or maybe at a school level, even other students or teachers that want to be part of this movement and this idea with you, it really creates that sense of community and your goals will go even farther. So look for local organizations, reach out to us if you want any ideas on who you could partner with, and ask teachers and other students to participate in that with you. That'll really help bring your community together and advance your goals together. And always, more minds are always better than one, so you can add in creative ideas and really start brainstorming with each other as well. The last one is to keep it fun and celebrate when you've achieved those goals. So Emily said this one perfect as well, is when you've got something that you're ready to celebrate, by having a goal in the beginning and being able to take action at the end, you'll know when to celebrate. So some examples of ways that schools and students have celebrated in the past is you could have a popsicle party for your school. You could even have a free dress day, or maybe there's some sort of incentive or reward in place so that it gets others to want to participate, and it just leaves room for celebration to acknowledge the great work that everyone has done to make that possible.
And we also really want to celebrate you as well. So if you've created a movement and you've achieved your goal, send us over your metrics, send us over pictures, send us videos, and we'll share the news far and wide in local press and media and over Instagram, because we're so proud of you and we want others to know the great work that you're doing as well.
I love that. Thanks, Emily. So now we're really excited to bring up Rob Arno with Incitement, and he is going to tell us a little bit about the campaign that he helped create and some of the lessons learned. So thanks for joining us, Rob. We're really excited to have you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I guess I'll just start out by telling you a bit about the campaign itself, and then I'll tell you just a few of the lessons I learned.
Yeah.
This was a legislative campaign, so we passed a piece of legislation to bring public campaign financing to San Francisco for the mayoral race. And so what that means is, in the United States, as opposed to most other industrialized democracies, people for the most part have to raise private money in order to wage an election campaign. And obviously this compromises them, because then they owe favors to the people that they raised money from. First, as in other countries and in some places in the United States, if you meet certain thresholds, the government will give you funding to run your campaign, and it creates a situation where the elected officials are far more accountable, which means all of these campaigns that people are running become far easier and more likely to happen, because entrenched interests don't have the ability to stop them so easily.
And how long were you working on this campaign for? When you say campaign, what does that look like for a timeline?
So it took about a year from the time we first discussed it to the time we passed the legislation, and yeah, that's.
And when did you jump on board? Was it something that was already started and you became part of, or were you part of it in the beginning?
So I was part of conceiving it along with a mentor I had, Stephen Hill, and I was part of a political organization, and I tried to convince them to take on this issue, hoping that we would hire someone who would spend their time full-time to be able to work on this. But ultimately that didn't happen, and so as I invested more and more time to get this rolling, at a certain point I realized that if I didn't do it, no one else was going to.
So it sounds like you also learned a lot of lessons with adaptability, how to be a flexible leader if it was something that you wanted to get done, and it sounds like you faced some roadblocks, but ultimately you overcame them because it eventually got passed.
This is all true. This is all true.
Awesome.
So I have a few lessons which may or may not be applicable to all the campaigns people are working on.
Yeah.
This one was specifically for a legislative campaign that potentially could have faced significant opposition from people who felt that their power would be diminished by it passing.
Gotcha.
So these are some, just a few lessons I learned. One of the things I learned that's commonly known in movements is it's often easier to build movements from collections of existing groups and organizations than from individuals. So the civil rights movement in the United States used as its base churches in large part, which were existing social units that could then be joined together into a larger movement, versus trying to recruit people one by one. So in our movement, there was individual recruiting, but in many cases there were activist organizations already existing in San Francisco, and we were able to get the membership of different groups involved, which made things a lot easier to build the mass support we needed.
So at Grades of Green, it sounds like one thing that could be applicable from that is that we have many schools that we work with. So maybe if you're looking to do something at a city level or a state level, would you suggest like maybe reach out to those other schools that are in your area to work with groups instead, to really create more people getting involved?
Absolutely, and the school, I would say, within this theory is a natural grouping that can be used versus, say, going out on the street and trying to recruit people.
I like that one. And is there any tips when you are looking for different groups in an area? Any tips for how did you know who to approach in that group? Do you Google, or did you look at a website to find out who that person is?
Well, certainly one can do that. I mean, it just so happened that I was very involved in the activist community, and so we usually had personal contacts at groups. And that would lead into one of my other lessons, which is that when you're building support, it's often, especially for something that may be contentious, you want to go to your friends and allies first and build up support in that way. So you don't want to say, well, we want to pass this thing, we want to pass an environmental thing, let's go to the corporation that's polluting. That's a bad idea. First, go to the members of your community who are likely to be supportive. And in fact, in this particular campaign, we were very deliberate to not announce the campaign publicly until we had already built up a lot of support. And so we went to organizations that ideologically were likely to support what we were doing, and also where we had personal connections, so they would trust that what we were doing was actually what we claimed we were doing. And so we started with really easy organizations, and we got endorsements and support from them, and then slowly went to harder and harder organizations. By the time we got to the more difficult organizations, we had a lot of names of support, and it made them a lot more likely to support us. We would say 40 organizations have already supported this. Then they felt like it was a no-brainer, versus you're the first organization we're coming to. People are going to feel a lot more unsure about whether they should support you in that context.
I love that. So think about it of who your allies or your friends could be in that space, and then approach them first to get that core group together.
Exactly. Like, say you were in a school, for example, maybe there's a certain teacher who you know is going to care about these things. Probably you want to approach those teachers first. Don't first go to the teacher who
you're not sure about.
Exactly.
Interesting. And for any Grades of Green students that are listening, that's something that your advisor can also definitely help you with as well. So sometimes having those beginning conversations can be tricky to know how to approach that, and your advisors are always here to practice with you if you want to have a few practice rounds before approaching others or teachers or other students that you'd like to get on board with. So that's a great one. And I also loved what you said, that kind of get your ideas and your core group together before, and strategize that and kind of have a map of what that looks like long term.
Yeah, and I would say that's even the bigger lesson, is really just thinking through the strategy of how it might actually happen. And one of the things, for example, we decided to do was we could have put a ballot initiative out there for the voters to vote on to pass this, but ultimately we did not have access to a lot of money, and that would be required to do that. So we evaluated getting the city council to pass it versus a ballot initiative, and decided one way was a lot less resource intensive for us than the other. So there may be those, I don't know how that plays out in these situations, but there may be situations where it's like, well, is it easier for us to get this done by getting the school to pass a resolution, the town to pass a resolution, by just getting people to adopt a certain behavior? What's the easiest way to get to the end goal?
I love that. And that also is applicable, I think, to a lot of our schools who may right now be thinking about fundraising and how really can we make something happen if fundraising is needed. So it sounds like if you do hit some of those fundraising roadblocks, are there other ways to approach the same idea, and talking to your allies at a school or a city level who may be able to help with that in case funding is hard to come by. Which that happens.
So my final thoughts are around just messaging and talking to people, because I think one of the problems we see among advocates a lot of times is people are telling people why they care about an issue, and not necessarily thinking about why the person they're talking to might care about that issue. So let's say for an environmental initiative in a school, the student may have a lot of reasons for caring about it. Let's say maybe they actually just legitimately care about the environment and want to see it protected. That's important to them. But teachers and parents might be more convinced by, say, the safety of the kids and the students. So maybe you don't care about that as the student, but you can, if you think that's what the teachers or parents are going to care about, you can frame it in a different way. And so it's very important to think through who the audience is and how to speak to them. And so in this particular campaign, we actually came up with a list of talking points for a bunch of different types of groups in the city, audiences. So we came up with talking points for liberals and conservatives and moderates and religious people and business owners, and why would it be important to these groups. And at the end we came up with this for 10 groups, and we cross-referenced them. So we found which are the talking points that are relevant to all of these groups, and there were 3 that were on every single list.
Oh, interesting.
So we used those 3 publicly, and then the other ones we would use in private conversations and presentations with these different groups.
Yeah.
And in fact, we would use different language to say exactly the same thing. So if we were talking to liberals, we might use a word like the people, whereas if we were talking to conservatives, we might talk about citizens. So there were just very simple types of words that would make people feel like you are part of their community and you are coming from the same perspective as them.
So it sounds like that one, really getting your elevator pitch down and making sure that when we're talking about something, it's not only why we care about something, but how can that other person be invested in what we're doing as well. So thinking about it in terms of the other person as well. So yes, why we care about something, but adding in other people's opinions and those other audiences is such a great idea.
Yeah, especially as you go higher up. I think that, within the context of just the school, the teachers and the parents may be so invested in the kids at the school that simply hearing the legitimate passion of the student for the issue and why the student cares
is always so important.
Yeah, that may be very convincing in and of itself, but I think once it reaches beyond that, those lessons become increasingly important.
And I think that's such a good one. We've talked to many of our students right now who are presenting to city council. So I think once it gets to that city council level and talking to cities about how to create that movement, also it sounds like maybe doing some research about the people that you're talking to, about other groups, and really I think a lot of the lessons that I'm hearing you say are doing some research, strategizing long term, knowing what your expectations are and how to achieve those outcomes is so important.
Yeah, so in this particular case, we actually had to get a supermajority of the Board of Supervisors, which is the City Council.
What's a supermajority?
It means more than a majority.
Okay.
So in this case, it had to, I think, be like 65%. So we had to get 8 out of 11 members of the Board of Supervisors and 4 out of 5 people on the Ethics Commission in order for this to pass as legislation. So it was a very high bar. And there were about, I think, 2 people on the Board of Supervisors and maybe 1 or 2 on the Ethics Commission that we weren't sure about. And so the way we convinced them is we actually did do very specific in-depth research about those individuals. And on the Board of Supervisors, we got people who were their fundraisers. Unfortunately, the problem of money in politics we used to our advantage as well by getting their fundraisers to convince them to support it, and also figured out who these people were influenced by and got those people to influence them.
And this campaign that Rob was a part of was on a state level. Are we allowed?
It was a city level.
Sorry, in a city level. Are we allowed to know about how many different audiences did you reach out to on a city level? Like, what does that look like on a city campaign?
Well, and we got, I think, 50-something organizations to endorse the initiative.
Wow.
That wasn't the number who were deeply involved, but that's how many presentations we did and how many organizations voted to support it. By the time the people who were naturally inclined to oppose it even realized we were doing it, we had built up too much support and they decided to not even contest it.
Wow.
So they were trying to do they were very quiet, and it made it a lot easier for us.
And this was all happening over the course of a year.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of our Grades of Green activities too, if something's taking a long time to complete, this project was a year long, and that's okay. And that length of time was needed, it sounds like, to strategize and roll something out that can make a big impact long term.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that was a particularly long time. I would say that was pretty fast, actually, to get a piece of very serious legislation passed. Yeah.
Good to know. So to the students out there that are watching right now, if it's been a year or two, keep going. It sounds like that's okay, and it can take that long to, when you're working at a city level and when you're working at a state level, to make those actions change into something bigger and beyond.
Absolutely.
Interesting. We have many students who've been working on projects for 2 and 3 years, so it's great to know from Rob's perspective as well that's if you're passionate about a project and you're looking to see it through, keep going on it and really lay out that plan for the long term too. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rob. Any last tips or pieces of advice for our students?
Just get out there and do it.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And to our Grades to Green students, thank you for joining. Our next webinar is on March 15th about how to tell your story and spread the word. And I think so much of what Rob already talked about too is really built in there about how to create that movement in your school. And now we'll be talking about spreading that word beyond as well. So thank you, Rob. And thank you, Grades to Green students, for joining us.